one thing that's always easy to see are guys that are easily susceptible to the influences of estrogen. And I'm talking about natural guys or gear, but gear kind of skews things around, so let's just talk natural. And if you have this issue naturally, you're definitely going to have it with gear. When you see, and fat distribution on males especially says a lot. That's totally genetic. That shit doesn't go away. You can disguise it. Let's put it that way. Okay? Sure, you could, with enough work, you could overcome the genetics. Absolutely. And you could, and when I say work, I also mean you have to have enough knowledge. You have to be successful at your application, through diet, nutrition particularly, and then through training too, but diet, nutrition particularly. You can disguise some of these things, okay? Like if you take a guy that has there are guys out there like this that have this hourglass. One guy in particular comes to mind that all you guys probably know who he is on YouTube. He has this hourglass, very feminine type of figure. Carries a lot of body fat and water. Carries a lot of water all over, very spongy, but he carries a good deal of body fat distributed around his hips, like a woman. He has that hourglass, that like curved in waist like a chick, and that hourglass thing. The only way that a man looks like that is he's either got a shit ton of estrogen receptors that are available, or he makes, compared to most men, a shit ton of estrogen. Or, we're always talking about ratios. His natural test production is so low, or he has a deficiency in receptors for the testosterone to engage. In any way you slice it or dice it or try to examine it, the outcome's the same. Estrogen shows directly in his physique, much more so than in most men. There are guys that you can see this in. They're puffy, they're always watery. If that guy, does that mean he can't get shredded? It's impossible. It's not impossible, but I guarantee it's more difficult for him than it would be for a guy that's naturally skinny and just very lean and hard. It's going to be a lot more difficult for this son of a bitch because that estrogen is problematic. And again, it's a ratio thing. He may not make more. He may just, it may be higher. It's whatever, why ever. It's higher in proportion to the testosterone as far as what's binding, what's actually having an effect on the body. Now, a guy like that, yeah, he could get ripped and lean and all that shit and not look like that, to where that wouldn't be a giveaway. But it doesn't matter. The moment he takes his foot off the gas, the moment he eases up on whatever his program is, whatever his regimen is, and I'm not talking about gear, I'm talking about, whatever he's done to achieve that, as soon as he lets up off of what it takes for him to maintain that, he will begin to look like that again. That's genetics, man. So there are certain things that are pretty is great likelihood that you can predict certain things, or that I can see a lot by looking at different people's bodies. Now if I saw them in a shredded condition or whatever, it's going to be a lot. That shit's not going to be as evident. But just left unto their own devices in the natural state of things, yeah, that stuff's going to show, man. That stuff's going to show. But as far as, I certainly wouldn't say that there are only 3 types. You could cut it down and just put categories, but I don't know how useful that's going to be to anybody anyway. Who the hell cares? But there's definitely differences in people. There's definitely difference naturally in, the physiological behavior or standing of different human beings. Absolutely. Absolutely. And as well as I do in yourself, like for me, I was what you would have called and what I believe to have been an ectomorph, because that was back in the day when, that was going around, and that was in all the magazines, and we didn't have any internet, we didn't have any of that, right? And I was very skinny, I was lean, very skinny, and even when I first discovered nutrition and that I need to eat, it's a long, slow process for me to gain weight. A long, slow process. Now, there are people that they want to think, oh, skinny guy just needs to eat. Well, that's not all there is to it, because if the skinny guy would slow down and stop expending calories, then the eating that he's achieving could go further. If you're a super active guy and you're hyperactive basically almost, and you're one of these guys like I used to be when I was a kid, I'm always tapping my foot or whatever and moving around, and I'm very active. On top of that, yeah, I'm skinny as a rail, and I'm going to have to eat like I eat a lot. It can be right, in the face of the limited gains or progress, but progress does come. So it's kind of good to realize these things, and there's things you can do about it, and those things are going to be different strategies than what the guy next to you, who maybe he gains fat very easily, and it seems like he's active, not as active as the skinny guy, maybe a hyperactive guy, but he gains fat very easily, he gets bloated very easily, he holds a lot of subcute water. That guy is not going to be able to eat the same diet as this skinny sumbitch and have the same outcome. It's not like both of these guys could go on the same diet and they're going to eventually begin to look alike. No. Even if all their things are equal. No. It's just not. It's just not. Can they both make improvements? Hell yeah, sure they can. Look, I did. So, in that regard, understanding, at least having an idea about what genetics have predisposed you to be more susceptible to, that is good, useful information. It can be, if you can understand it, figure it out, and consider that when putting your plan together. That can be useful. But on the other side of the coin, you don't want to box yourself in and say, oh, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, and really believe that wholeheartedly and let that dissuade you. You don't want to say, oh, the skinny guy, oh, I'm an ectomorph. It says right here, and it says I'm difficult to gain muscle, and it says, and you may feel those things are true. But I'll tell you one thing over the years that, if nothing else, I've observed in people, and that is you can never predict. Initially untrained, you can see certain things, you can predict, well, this guy's going to fare better with this diet than that diet, or do some different things with the macros over what this guy does, and this person needs this and that. It's a little easier there, but you really can't, no matter how tempted you might be, to look at somebody and say, that guy can't get that big, or that guy, he'll never be able to get lean. That's the worst part of it. You don't want to look at these, you don't want to typecast yourself in some kind of a, place where you let that define you. And so you become complacent and settle back and say, well, I can't get big, or, well, I can't get lean, or, well, you don't want to get there, because I've seen, myself as a child, I was like the last kid you would ever look at and say, oh, that sumbitch is going to be a big monster one day, muscle all over him. Which I'm not saying I am now, but I was. I'm the last guy you would look at and say that. Christ, there was a time when, the medical community, doctors, specialty hospitals like Kernan's would look at me and say, I'm sorry, but he's probably never going to walk on his own. So I wasn't anybody that you would look at and say, oh, well, he's, not only is he going to be able to walk, and his spine's going to be nice and straightened up, and he's going to be able to, these impingements are going to rectify themselves as he grows, and he's going to be able to not only do that, but he's going to become, he's going to get into combat sports, and then he's eventually going to move into weightlifting, and he's going to get big, and he's going to be this huge 300-pound guy, and be able to compete in the 250s. Last guy, you would have thought that of, last guy. So, yeah, pretty much, you are under, you are at the mercy to your genetics. You're not going to change your genetics, but reading those genetics, you can predict some things in an untrained person, like I said, just from so many years. But don't lock into that and think that that's going to be the rule for this person forever after, because it's not. Coming out of the gate, tactics, you can predict certain things maybe, but later on, as you get into it, you don't know what's going to happen. I've seen people that you never thought this guy would ever gain any muscle, and he hasn't gained any muscle, and he's 30 years old now, and then all of a sudden he starts training and working out and actually eats correctly for the first time and actually has a dedicated nutritional plan. He starts to blow the hell up because the stimulation was never there before and the material was never there before, And I've seen people who have been literally obese their entire lives. One guy, Bill, I know right now, he was, I don't even know how heavy he was at his heaviest, 360-ish. Really, really high level of body fat. Pretty much just confined to a chair. He could move around a little bit, but not a whole hell of a lot. And today, I think last I saw him, he was like 180 pounds. And so he spent most of his life really overweight. And now he's like the fittest he's been in his entire life, and he's like 50 years old or so. So, to that degree, as you go along on your own, you are going to become more familiar, intimate, I'm sure, with your own body, and hopefully you're going to begin to know and feel and understand more, and you'll find out for yourself that work ethic and, of course, knowledge and application, you got to do it. Right? You can't just talk about it. You can't just plan it out. You can't just know it in that regard. You have to actually eat that diet every day. You have to be consistent. You have to, whatever you're training for, you have to train for that. You can't, take a lackadaisical attitude. You have to actually commit to making it happen. And, small steps to the moon, that's how it's done. So the biggest thing I would take away from this is these somatypes. Yeah, I'm guilty of sight unseen. People tell me, well, I'm just naturally an ectomorph, basically an untrained individual. I know what that is then. I know he's a skinny guy, he feels that way, and I know what his assessment of himself. And if he tells me I'm pretty much just an endomorph, I know what that is looking like and what that guy perceives as, how he judges his untrained people. You know what I mean? So it gives me, I can envision what he's talking about. But beyond that, it's not anything that's going to be useful to you. You're not that in that regard. You'll probably outgrow any usefulness of that very, very quickly, of thinking in those terms. And again, you don't want to box yourself in and confine yourself to be very unrealistic. So that's it.